What is life going to be like after the felon is gone? Let's look into that. Welcome to Scrying Out Loud. My name is Trevor. First off, a huge thank you to everybody who's subscribed to the channel. Thank you to the new subscribers. Thank you for liking, watching, commenting on the video, liking the video, giving it a thumbs up. Thank you for sharing the videos, promoting the channel on your own social media platform. It's all greatly, greatly appreciated. And if you've donated money to the channel through the super thanks, buy me a coffee or Venmo, a huge, huge thank you. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. So on my other channel, I did a reading on the global energies after the felon has gone. I thought maybe we would be a little bit more specific. On this channel, I think we'll look at the world economies, political stability, the US economy, US democracy, and then I think the most important is to look at the mental health in the US and in the world. So I'm going to do this similar to the way that I did this on the other channel. And so we'll start with the felon, the King of Pentacles. We'll start with the Death card, since we're going to be talking about after he's gone. And we'll have the Ace of Wands to represent the new leadership that comes about. And we're just going to leave these up here just so that we can keep them in our sights. And let's start with the world economies and political stability. So, okay, so the felon's gone. What do we need to know about world economies, political stability? I think other countries are already moving forward without the US. Um, I think they continue to do that. I think the US gets reincorporated at some point once there's some assurances. World economies, political stability. Yeah, the stability in the Middle East, I think, stays unstable, at least in the short term. It's got potential in the long term to fix it. So yeah, maybe I'm wrong. With the Queen of Pentacles, which is a kind of a stability card. What do we need to know about world economies and political stability after Felon has departed the planet? I just keep getting drawn to the images of the celebrations after President Biden won in 2020, after the 7 days of insanity of counting the votes. Everybody taking to the streets and celebrating. I think we get that again, but this time it's not just a relief, it's a knowing he's never coming back type of relief. Um, so I think there'll still be worry, obviously, about what Republicans are going to do moving forward. There's still going to be hot spots in the world where things aren't going okay. Sorry about that. Little pause and alarm was going off. Um, there's still going to be hot spots in the world. I can see that in the scrying bowl, in particular, that northeastern part of Africa and the central part of Africa will be tumultuous still. The area around Palestine and Gaza and Israel, I think that remains kind of a hot trigger button. Um, Russia, Ukraine, I think it fizzles out. I don't see that like years down the road, but it could be. So that's good. So things get moderated, and I like temperance here for the reading. Temperance, of course, is a feeling of moderation, a feeling of kind of a deeper understanding of the woes of the world. But temperance is also the card after death, which is just kind of confirmation that we're reading on the right thing. Uh, going to be a lot of celebrating, planning, people taking trips, people um, interacting in the global economy again versus isolating themselves to only taking trips within their region. Um, People coming back to the United States for tourist activities. Um, it does feel like a huge relief. If nothing else, it's predictability. And yeah, we get a return to balance. Things are more balanced. It's like things go back kind of to the way they were before the felon ever entered the scene and the sense of trade agreements. Like, except for they're a little bit more balanced. And um, a lot of the BS that the felon was spouting just wasn't true about these unfair trade agreements he keeps talking about. They really weren't unfair. Um, there might be a few exceptions here and there, but for the most part, especially with Europe and Japan, um, and Australia and Canada and Mexico and South American countries and Central American countries, things were pretty balanced. And I feel like there's a return to that. I don't think it's a return to what was before. I think it's just a renegotiation to kind of try to get things out. Now, whether that happens underneath uh, a President Vance or whether it happens under a Democrat in 2029, that'll remain to be seen. But the optimism is there. The optimism is like instantly there that things are going to become more balanced. We get the double card in the environment around, um, toxicity, mis and disinformation. It's in the environment around. It's a worry. It's a worry that this is the new norm. And this is normal. It's normal to question whether one singular event will really transform the world. The answer is kind of yes and kind of no, right? There's a transformation in the sense of things become predictable. There's not the transformation in the sense that there's still toxicity and mis and disinformation coming out from people like Elon Musk, MAGA Republicans in the United States, and still Putin, of course, if he's still around, which I think he will be for at least a month or several months after the felon, and Netanyahu as well. So it's not like everything is peachy keen, right? But things are better, and they're better because they're predictable. Uh, we get the Four of Cups. Things aren't going to improve as fast as people want, but that's going to be a malaise, right? There's going to be a month or two of like elation, and then there's going to be the settling back into realizing there's a lot of hard work left to do. Um, and then, of course, there are the people in the world that'll be disappointed that the felon is departed. Don't personally understand them, but um, when we get the Six of Swords in the environment around, this is forward movement, in particular, movement out of trouble. So I like that. I think that's good. We get messages coming forward about money. This makes a lot of sense. And we get the stability, this nurturing type thing. Countries will be able to um, better take care of their populace because they're not going to be worried about sudden trade dynamics changing, supply chain issues popping up out of the blue. There's just like everything starts working again. You know, the canning factories aren't going to be waiting for aluminum, things like that. So the supply chain, I feel, stabilizes, which makes things a lot better. And yeah, and another sign of stability here with the Four of Pentacles. Yeah, so things moderate. There will be a period of time, probably a couple months after the event happens, where people have this ugh type feeling. It's kind of maybe not ugh. It's more like when you were a kid and you were really excited for Christmas and then Christmas was over, or you were really excited for your birthday and then your birthday was over. It's kind of like that feeling after the day after. Temperance is also the card for that's right after death. So I think that kind of fits here. But the one thing that there will be stability um, in the global economy. Uh, there'll be messages coming forward about money. Most people won't pay much attention to them because they're just going to be um, focused on piecing themselves back together. But it does balance things out, and there's kind of a return to this balanced approach to the world, or a return to justice, if you want. There's going to be a lot of celebration. And there's also going to be, most people are going to realize that the toxicity isn't over. It's just going to take a different a different look to it. And there's stability, and then the world economy moving out of the troubles and political stability. We kind of already talked about that. I think for the most part, things return, um, things remain stable. Look, I don't see any new conflicts or anything like that. I mean, it's a brand new beginning, and there's a lot of hope, and hope is very powerful, especially when the whole world is hoping. And, I think we get overseas travel in exchange of overseas money. And I think if one plan doesn't work, try another. I think all the world leaders are going to figure things out. And they're going to bust through this inheritance that was left by the felon's departure, and things are going to improve. Okay. So, what about the US economy? So, now the US economy, I think, is going to be the last one to really recover. I think it's going to take a little while. I think he's left us in a pretty dark hole. Um, but it does. It does. It craters is too strong a word. It bottoms out. It doesn't bottom out super low, by the way. It just bottoms out. And then things start to improve. I think the stock market's already pricing this in, that the bottom is pretty close. Uh, So you tell us about the US climate. And then we'll look at the US democracy, and then we'll look at mental health in the world, and the US in particular. Certainly the world's been traumatized, but the people in the US, I think, doubly, because it's a day-to-day thing. And of course, really knowledgeable people around the world have also been traumatized on the same level. And just about the US economy. I think there's a kind of an immediate reaction that makes things look like it's bad, with the stock market, but that'll recover. Don't make financial decisions based on this reading. Yeah, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of hope that the US will get back on the world stage in a respectful way. Yeah, I think people start traveling again, overseas travel. I think it's inevitable. Three of Wands. I think the truth comes out about a lot of why things were done the way they were done. And I think that actually eases some global leaders that aren't in the United States' minds. Yeah, things just start to balance out. I think justice is going to be a key card after he goes. It's not only karmic justice for him, because his reputation, which most of us think is abhorrent already, is going to be really drugged through the mud. It's just going to be, that's just the way it's going to be. There's not going to be any love lost when he goes. It's there's going to be celebrations, and here they are with the Knight of Wands, more freedom. I think, eventually the tariffs get negotiated to something that's reasonable. I don't know exactly how that works. I don't know if it happens under Vance. It feels like it does, but it wouldn't surprise me if it doesn't. Um, if it waits until a Democrat gets into power. And the economy is going to take off. It is. Right now, companies don't know what to do in the United States because they don't know if they can even get the basic goods that they need to keep their operation running. I mean, we talked about this in another reading. I think we're up to 12 distilleries in Kentucky that have filed for bankruptcy because they can't sell their bourbon outside of the United States. Um, Nobody wants it. It's not even the price of it. It's just nobody wants it. And particularly Canada doesn't want it. So I do think that the economy starts to take off after the felon is gone. Yeah, and there's more trade, giving and receiving of money, exchanging of goods. Trade does pick up. And again, there's just a lot of hope, and hope is very powerful, especially when the hope is of more than half the world and more than half the country hoping for a positive change in direction. And I think that gets scared into MAGA and the Republicans when they see the worldwide celebrations after his death. I really do. I think when they see millions of people marching through New York City and hundreds of thousands of people marching through all the major cities in the US, and if you're outside of the US doesn't have too many cities over 1 million people. Um, just major celebrations all over in small towns, mid-sized cities, big cities in the United States and around the world as well. But that scares the MAGA Republicans. It just does because they start to realize that they are not just disliked, they are loathed, they are hated, that people don't want anything to do with them. And all of a sudden, I think we start hearing different things from them. It will take a while. There will be a point of pause and suspension. This is fairly normal. Um, you know, I think it's going to take a while to figure out how to fix these things, but also, things don't change overnight. They just don't, especially when it comes to economic stuff. It takes a year or two. Just like we're just now starting to feel the effects of the tariffs, right? It just is the way things are. So uh, I think the US has a better sense of its place in the world and the citizenry feel a freedom with an understanding that it's going to take some time to repair these damages that the felon caused. But trade picks up, which leads to more freedom, more hiring, companies expanding, and the truth coming out reaffirms to people just how awful the felon was. Do you think there'll be more travel overseas? I think ice, that stuff kind of calms down. I want to do a specific reading on that at some point. There's a return to a feeling of balance, a feeling of predictability, a feeling of, okay, I've got, this amount of money for groceries this month, and I know exactly what I can buy to get me through the month. Versus right now, it's like I have this amount of money for groceries for the month, and I'm not sure if I'm going to make it because I have no idea how much things are going to cost next week. The economy, I really think, does take off. It's like kind of a people start investing in the US after he's gone. And there's just a lot of hope, and hope is quite powerful. And underneath, we got circles of support and unlikely partners. And then, this is the Republicans realizing that they are completely wounded and they didn't need, there doesn't even need to be an election. Just the celebrations in the street after he passes will be enough to let them know that they're not on the right side of this thing. Okay. So what about US democracy? Everybody's asked me about this. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people do. I've always seen US democracy as being quite resilient. Yeah, it's definitely being challenged, but it was challenged it's been challenged throughout the existence of the United States. It's the way it's been. From Andrew Jackson, uh, George W. Bush doing things that he shouldn't have been doing, building a whole base outside the country so that they could torture people. Um, Democracy is always, in peril in some sense, but it's also quite resilient. So um, we sometimes forget how bad certain actions were. We had uh, illegal selling of arms to Iran, for example, in the 80s. We had all sorts of things that have gone wrong throughout the decades. And even under, like I'm an idealist, I guess, I certainly like President Obama, but I hated the fact that we were using drones to shoot people. So, you know, the biggest thing I think as far as the world goes will be reestablishing US aid in Africa. I think that'll be super, and I think that happens. Because it's like making farmers not be able to sell their crops. I mean, it's got a trickle down effect that the felon is just an idiot. He cannot possibly comprehend the complexities of the world economy and how, food stamps generate money, EBT distributions generate money for the country. It's counterintuitive because macroeconomics is not microeconomics. Your day-to-day budget doesn't work that way. Okay. Give me the state of US democracy after the felonies. It's gonna be okay. It really, it's not gonna be easy. It's not going to be a straightforward path, but you know what? It never has been. Yeah, the Hierophant, our higher selves, the church, the courts. I think the courts are more willing to like be aggressive after he goes. I don't think the attack on the judiciary is there anymore. Not in a substantive way, not in a let's impeach these people way. It's just kind of a letting things be. It's the end of the dark cycle, the Ten of Swords. You know, the cycle has ended, and now we have a new beginning. the Democrats eventually get in charge, that's where things really get repaired. I think we get DC statehood, for example. I think we get um, a national law about gerrymandering. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if we get court reform as well. We get the lover's card, unlikely partners. Um, I think MAGA has lost a lot of moderate Republicans that will now become Democrats. Uh, Maybe not in name, but in the way they vote. Um, I just don't see MAGA having much power after 2029 in particular. Uh, US democracy, again, I think it sort of becomes this idealistic thing to be mimicked by the rest of the world. It takes some time, but it gets back to that. Um, and I think, the US finally agrees to have UN inspectors in elections, and they don't care what Texas says. It's like, okay, Texas, if you don't, your votes don't count. We're going to have monitors. That's the way it's going to work. And if you don't like it, well, then you forfeit your congressmen, your senators, and your electoral votes. We're walking away from the damage that the felon caused with the Eight of Cups. It no longer serves us. I think MAGA too starts to walk away. Of course, I think we need to be very conscientious that there's going to be people that are upset by this that might try to cause chaos through domestic terrorism, for example, but it's not going to affect overall democracy. These are just going to be blips along the way. There is no straight lines in life. There just isn't. The citizenry are going to need time to rest and recoup. This is where this is the danger point here. Um, that we don't allow anything crazy to happen while we're trying to recuperate from the trauma we've been through. And again, we get things being back in balance. The checks and balances are back. Things are working well. I think the courts are more aggressive. I think the US submits to uh, like the World Criminal Court, for example. But in particular, they allow UN inspectors to monitor elections in red states and blue states. And if red states say no, there'll be a law saying, okay, well, you just don't get votes. And that's the way it will be. So that brings a lot of balance back to things. Do you think we need to watch out for the occasional domestic terrorist? Um, and then overseas relations improve once the Democrats are back in charge. This is the end of a very dark cycle, which is going to require some rest and recuperation. People are going to be walking away from the felon and the felon's belief system. And I think we'll see Republicans and independents teaming up with Democrats to ensure Republicans don't have power in many places. It's always felt like we don't have a seat at the table while he's there. I think that changes and we're at a crossroads, and then all of a sudden the truth matters again. So I do think that things get better on that front. Um, let's do some parts on the mental health of the world, and in particular the United States, and maybe that's US centric, but um, well-informed people around the world have been just as traumatized, but it's been super traumatizing for seniors on a budget, worried about Medicare, people worry about Medicaid, Social Security, all of these things. And everybody knows somebody that relies on one of these programs. Show us the mental health around the US and around how does it change after the felon departs? People have better access. There's been funding cut in the US in particular with respect to mental health. I think people have better access to it. Suicide rates are on the rise in the US. They just are. Suicide rates around the world, it depends on where you look, but they're still quite high. Uh, I think, just being able to reconnect with family and friends that don't live in the country for a lot of us, that's a huge relief. Bringing people to the United States, like parents, if you're a US citizen, but you were born in a different country, and right now you can't really get your parents into the country very easily. Spouses as well. It's kind of a mess. I think all of this stuff gets better. I think people will be guarded in the beginning, the Seven of Wands. And it's felt like we're walking down this really dark alleyway with the Ten of Pentacles, not realizing all the good stuff that's behind us. I think we turn around and we look. We get to see the good stuff behind us. The Seven of Pentacles, the brain's still going to be spinning because trauma takes a while to get over. And then we get families, reunion, celebration, the Ten of Cups. I think the political divide, while will never be completely repaired with families where one went MAGA and the other one went the same way, um, it it gets better. The Knight of Pentacles, I think there'll be more resources available. And we get the puppeteer in the environment around. It's no longer going to feel like we're just in this big play where we're watching it act out. It's going to feel like we are participating again. And we get victory, the Six of Wands. I like that. So I think mental health services are better to address the trauma and people are able to recover. And there'll be more resources to address the trauma. Some people might not choose to use them, but a lot of people will. The world will also be right along the US in its healing stage. We'll start to realize that we're missing things that we've been rather myopic because we've been focused on the felon, and we start to enjoy our families again. In particular, a lot of families that have broken up over the felon, I think, start to make repairs. Things will never be the same. They just start to make repairs. And we no longer feel like we're just pawns in this game of life. We feel like we have a say. So it all seems pretty good. Yeah, it's a new reality. You know, yeah, there's going to be some internal conflict. There's going to be trauma associated with, the mobs that we've seen in the United States and of the sabotage. But we quickly move away from that, the Knight of Wands, into this Two of Cups type of energy of partnerships and meaningful relationships. And then we get the Ace of Wands, this new leadership, which I think really solidifies that. I don't think that Ace of Wands, by the way, was Vance. I think this one course was because I set it up to be that way. So it's going to take some time, but ultimately, the world does recover. Things do get better. So, all right, thank you for watching. I'll be back with another video.